Okay guys, so in the last video I went over ABO blood groups. So in this video I'm going to talk about RH factor. Now RH factor is similar to ABO blood groups in that either you have RH antigens present on your red blood cells or you don't. If you have RH antigens present on your red blood cells, like in this first picture here, you're considered RH positive. Okay. If you don't have Rh antigens present on your red blood cells, you're considered Rh negative. So you can kind of combine this with the ABO blood groups, in that if you take a red blood cell, if it has A antigens present on it and Rh antigens, then this is a positive blood type. Okay. If the blood cell only has A antigens and no Rh antigens, then this person is a negative blood type. And you can do that with all of the other ABO blood groups as well. Okay. So this is pretty much the same thing in that, if you have the Rh antigen, then that means you're not going to have any antibodies against the Rh factor. Okay. So no antibodies would be present in someone who is Rh positive against the Rh factor. If the person's Rh negative, okay, then they would have these anti-Rh antibodies present in their bloodstream. Now, one thing that makes Rh factor different from the ABO blood groups is that these anti-Rh antibodies do not start to become present until a person has been exposed to this Rh antigen, okay, that's present on a different red blood cell from another person. Now, one time when this might come into play, would be in a blood transfusion, obviously. If a person who's Rh negative gets a blood transfusion from someone who is Rh positive, then they would be exposed to that antigen, and their body's going to start producing these anti-Rh antibodies after that exposure. So the second time they come into contact with that blood type, then they would have a transfusion reaction where these antibodies would bind to those antigens and cause agglutination, just like we talked about in the ABO blood group. Another time when this is important is during pregnancy. Okay, if you have a woman who is Rh negative and she becomes pregnant by a man who is Rh positive, there's a chance that their infant, that their fetus, could also develop the Rh positive blood type. And so that's extremely important because whenever the mother gives birth to that child, there's a chance that their blood will mix during that birthing process. And at that point, the mother's blood would come in contact with the infant's blood and it would mix. And she would start producing antibodies against those Rh antigens that may be present on that infant's blood cells. Okay. Once she starts producing those antibodies, if she becomes pregnant again with another infant who is Rh positive, those antibodies that she produced can actually cross that placental barrier and can attack that fetus that she's carrying and can actually kill the fetus. Okay, so this is called Rh incompatibility, and it can cause a lot of problems there. So now, thanks to technology, we have what's called a RhoGAM shot that mothers are given that are Rh negative. So like me, for example, I'm type O negative blood type, so I had to receive the RhoGAM shot, just in case my baby was Rh positive, so that I did not produce those anti-Rh antibodies against his red blood cells. Also with the Rh factor, just like with the ABO blood types, since Rh positive blood cells do not contain any antibodies against the Rh factor, that means that they can receive blood from anyone who is positive or negative blood type. People who are Rh negative blood, since they can develop antibodies against that Rh factor, they can only receive blood from other people who are a negative blood type. Okay, so they can only receive from other negative blood types. So like, for example, A positive blood, this one right here, A positive blood, they can receive blood from anyone who is A positive, A negative. They can also receive from O positive and O negative blood types, because remember, those are the universal donors. Whereas someone who has A negative blood, they can only receive from these blood types that are negative, okay, because they would be producing these anti-RH antibodies, so they can't receive blood from anyone who has those RH antigens present. So A negative blood type would only be able to receive from other A negative blood types and O negative blood types, okay? So hopefully this helps you out with the RH factor and kind of what that is. Make sure you understand the difference, between RH factor and the ABO blood groups as far as those RH antibodies, right? Those anti-RH antibodies. Remember that these antibodies are only produced after a person has been exposed to an RH antigen. We're not actually born with these antibodies. We have to produce them after we're exposed to the antigen, just like with pretty much any other antigen exposure that you may come into contact with, right? Let me know if you guys have any questions about this.